he was upon the earth. His voice is soft and subdued, yet full of melody. In gentle, compassionate tones, he presents some of the same gracious heavenly truths which the Savior uttered. He heals the diseases of the people. And then, in his assumed character of Christ, he claims to have changed the Sabbath to Sunday and commands all to hallow the day which he has blessed. He declares that those who persist in keeping holy the seventh day are blaspheming his name by refusing to listen to his angels sent to them with light and truth. This is the strong, almost overmastering delusion. From The Great Controversy, page 624. Do you notice how this particular activity by the devil, personating Christ, is wrapped up in Sunday legislation? Did you notice that? That he actually says, he claims to have changed the Sabbath to Sunday and commands all to hallow the day which he has blessed. He declares that those who persist in keeping holy the seventh day are blaspheming his name by refusing to listen to his angels. So that is one big reason why I put the personation of Christ by Satan right here, because it fits with these developments. Now there is one other thing. Some people think the personation of Christ should come over here around the time of the sixth plague, and it has to do with some of the language there in the sixth plague. But that doesn't make sense to me, because after the final close of probation, I don't really understand the purpose of a deception or a delusion. So it seems to me that this is really where that would fit. All right, there's one more part of the little time of trouble I want to look at quickly, and that's in Selected Messages, Volume 2, page 80. The Lord has shown me clearly that the image of the beast will be formed before probation closes, for it is to be the great test for the people of God by which their eternal destiny will be decided. Now this phrase, the image of the beast being formed, is a clear, another phrase pointing to the National Sunday Law issue. But what I want to point out here that is of interest, I think, to us, is that this is called the great test for who? The people of God. Now we know it's also the test for the whole world, but there's a very interesting principle here that we should touch on, and that's found in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 17. For the time is come that judgment must begin at the house of God. And if it first begin at us, what shall the end be of them that obey not the gospel? You can find this principle also in Ezekiel 9. That principle is that judgment comes first for the professed people of God, and later, after that, for the rest of the world. Now, once you sort of have that fastened in mind, you can contemplate this idea that probation would close for, I put for Seventh-day Adventists, for anyone professing to be a follower of God, before it would close for the rest of the world, because judgment begins first at the house of God. Now, that idea is not particularly new, but there is discussion going around right now in Adventist circles about this point. Kind of, some would consider it splitting hairs, but I think it's important to consider it for a moment. And that is, when would probation then close? If, as we read a moment ago, the final test for the people of God is what? The mark of the beast, the image of the beast being fully formed, okay? If that's the final test, people say, well, so when the Sunday law is passed, does that mean that probation has closed for Seventh-day Adventists? Well, if that's the final test, here's how I can get my small pea brain around this. When I was in school, when it was time for a test, the teacher would give us the test paper to write on. I never ever had a test handed to me on which I already had a grade, right? I had to take the test. And so if this issue is the final test for the people of God, it doesn't make sense to me that probation is already closed for them when the Sunday law is passed, because they have to take the test. That's the way a test works. But of course, some of us who like to ponder these things are asking the question, well, how long will God's people have when the Sunday law is passed? And so what helps me, again, is go back to the classroom, because usually we had 50-minute sessions, And I was the kind of guy that generally, even if I completed the test early, I would usually take the whole time to go over my answers and make sure that I did everything right. Some people, those few people that would like hop up after 30 minutes and walk out of the class and turn the test in, and most of those people got good grades. Maybe a few cases where someone just had a brain freeze, but usually those people were smart and they turned the test in and they left. I guess the point is God knows how long we need to take the test, right? He knows how long we need to respond. And we can leave that with Him. The important thing is that our response will be critical and that God's people are held to a higher accountability because they have more light. And so their probation closes before the rest of the world. So that's why the distinction here, and then we move on to the final close of probation. Now, let's take a look at this last segment, and we're going to look at Daniel chapter 12, verse 1 to do that. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. In talking about this, Mrs. White had this to say: when he leaves the sanctuary, darkness covers the inhabitants of the earth. In that fearful time, the righteous must live in the sight of a holy God without an intercessor. The restraint which has been upon the wicked is removed, and Satan has entire control of the finally impenitent. God's long-suffering has ended. The world has rejected His mercy, despised His love, and trampled upon His law. The wicked have passed the boundary of their probation. The Spirit of God, persistently resisted, has been at last withdrawn. Unsheltered by divine grace, they have no protection from the wicked one. Satan will then plunge the inhabitants of the earth into one great final trouble. As the angels of God cease to hold in check the fierce winds of human passion, all the elements of strife will be let loose. The whole world will be involved in ruin more terrible than that which came upon Jerusalem of old. This is from the Great Controversy, page 614. And notice she started this description, this statement, by indicating that this happens when Jesus leaves the sanctuary. And so this moves us into this segment of time following the final close of probation, the great time of trouble, to be distinguished from the little time of trouble. In Revelation chapter 15, verse 1, we read this: I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them is filled up the wrath of God. In early writings on page 36, she wrote this: I saw that the 4 angels would hold the 4 winds until Jesus' work was done in the sanctuary, and then will come the 7 last plagues. So this helps us to understand the 7 last plagues come after the close of probation. And again, we read this in Great Controversy, pages 627 and 628. When Christ ceases His intercession in the sanctuary, the unmingled wrath threatened against those who worship the beast and his image and receive his mark will be poured out. The plagues upon Egypt when God was about to deliver Israel were similar in character to those more terrible and extensive judgments which are to fall upon the world just before the final deliverance of God's people. So here again we see this idea that the plagues follow Christ ceasing His intercession in the sanctuary. So we can place the 7 last plagues right here in the great time of trouble. Now there is something that also happens during this time which I didn't realize was clearly pinpointed, but I want to show it to you. I find it very interesting. In Revelation 13:15, we read, He had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So we're going to take a look here for a moment at the death decree and how that is laid out in time for us. In early writings, pages 36 and 37, we're told this: I saw that the 4 angels would hold the 4 winds until Jesus' work was done in the sanctuary, and then will come the 7 last plagues. These plagues enraged the wicked against the righteous. They thought that we had brought the judgments of God upon them, and that if they could rid the earth of us, the plagues would then be stayed. A decree went forth to slay the saints, which caused them to cry day and night for deliverance.